Let's talk about predictions for Week 12. Again, we've already gotten a number of them out of the way. We're going to do several more tonight. Mississippi State is playing Georgia Saturday. This probably isn't on your radar. Georgia is a several touchdown favorite. I think they're favored by about 25.5 right now. It's the Saturday 7:30 Eastern game on SEC Network. I hit Colin with this number a second ago, and he had a hard time believing it. And I don't blame him, because when I saw this number I'm about to give to you last night, I had a hard time believing it. Steve Robertson and Paul Jones and the guys over at our Mississippi State 24/7 site, they've been tracking the scholarship situation at Mississippi State in the roster there. What if I told you that they are going into Athens, Georgia Saturday with 54 scholarship players? You'd say, oh, that's not shocking, Josh, because it's a COVID year. So how many guys do they have out for COVID? None. That's the point. None. They've had so many injuries and so many opt-outs, and guys have just walked away from the program this year. They're sitting at 54 scholarship players without COVID being an interrupter this week, as far as we know. Those are very dire circumstances, to say the least. So they go in there, and because of all that, I mean, they're at a significant roster disadvantage. JT Daniels is getting the start for Georgia Saturday. We thought he was going to get it last week. Game got postponed, so he's getting the start this week. What do we expect from him? Well, I think there are varying degrees of expectations out there. I have spoken to some of you as recently as like 30 minutes ago who think he's going to go light the world on fire. I am not of that opinion. Now, I'm excited to see what he offers. I'm excited to just see the ball come out of his hand, first off. We hadn't seen him this year. Secondly, I'm excited to see the ball come out of his hand because, you know, we keep talking about what Georgia needs, the ability to push the ball down the field, accuracy, poise, all the intangibles along with that make up a good quarterback. I mean, everyone just assumes JT Daniels has those things, and I hope he does. For your sake, for his sake, for all of our sakes, I hope he does. It's good for us when Georgia wins. But I keep going back to this. There is this very false notion out there that this guy's been ready all year, and Kirby Smart's just, he's been opposed to winning and putting the best quarterback on the field, so he's just opted to sit JT Daniels. Well, that's obviously not the case. Only a moron would think that. And so there are reasons why he hasn't been on the field. It could be that he just cleared protocols that they had in place, and it just now happened. Or it could be that, hey, we thought Stetson Bennett was our best shot. Hey, we have nothing to lose at this point. Let's give JT Daniels a shot. There's a morbid side of me that would be fascinated to see what would happen here if he went like 14 for 17 with 235 through the air and 3 touchdowns in the first half. I mean, what would those halftime message boards look like? Yeah, but having said that, I do expect Georgia to win here. It's probably more realistic with Mississippi State having a pretty good defensive product. It's probably more realistic to see not necessarily a repeat of the Kentucky game, maybe a few more offensive fireworks than that, but I don't think Georgia's necessarily, naming the score here, running it up into the 50s or 60s. I do expect a Georgia win because of how limited Mississippi State is offensively. Wouldn't be surprised at the cover either. Our model doesn't really lean heavily either way on the spread, so we're going to take Georgia to win. I'll lay the 25.5. It's below 4 touchdowns, and that's that kind of murky area where if Georgia's capable, 28's the line of demarcation that I'd draw the line in the sand there on. How about Wisconsin? They're favored by 7. They're on the road at Northwestern. This is a Saturday 3:30 Eastern Time kickoff on ABC. Neither of these teams, if you watched them this year, have given up a ton on the ground. They've been very good. They've forced you to move the ball through the air against them. No one's really done so effectively to this point. So if I were to just state that, and you got Ramsey over here at Northwestern, and of course you got Graham Mertz at Wisconsin, which team does that make you more uncomfortable backing? Does it make you more uncomfortable if I tell you Wisconsin's going to have to move the ball through the air to win? Or does it make you more uncomfortable if I say Northwestern got to move the ball through the air to win? I think most people would probably lean Wisconsin on being safer there. I think the point spread on this game reflects that. But here's the part 2 to that. We acknowledge part 1. Part 2 is Wisconsin has one of the top run defenses in the country, conference and country, but also I think they're right up there. They may be number 1, if not their top 5, in fewest penalty yards per game. So what does all that mean? Well, what all of it means is sometimes when you go into these games, in college football games in general, if you'll just outlast the opponent and just be the team that doesn't lose the game, you'll get some default wins in college football. If you're comparable enough roster-wise, you can count on the other guy to lose a few games a year for you. Wisconsin's not doing that. So you're going to have to beat him. You can beat him, but you're going to have to beat him. And the part 3 there, to even further drive that point home, I think they have 1 turnover all year. So they're not beating themselves. And as a result, I don't expect anything crazy here. I like Wisconsin's edges, even on the road. So I'm going to take them to win. However, our model, I think, had Wisconsin -5. So I will lean ever so slightly towards Northwestern plus those 7 points, but I will take Wisconsin to win outright. Kentucky at Alabama. Again, probably not a game on a lot of radars, but I have a reason for why you need to pay attention to this game. Bama favored by 29. That thing's kind of moved north and south of 30 all week. It's a 4 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff, SEC Network. This is the first time we've seen Alabama since that Mississippi State game. It's been 2 weeks now. Trey Sanders, since then, has been involved in an automobile accident. He's out for the year. Now, I didn't say Najee Harris. I said Trey Sanders. So you still got Najee. You still got Brian Robinson. What I'm the most excited to see in this game, though, is how much, and I think the answer is quite significantly, but how much they will use the true freshman running backs they have. One by the name of Jace McClellan, guy that they fought tooth and nail with Oklahoma for and won on that deal. And then the other being Roydell Williams, who was an in-state product for him this past recruiting cycle. I sat right on this stage with Barton and Wiltfong sat over here. I remember talking about both of those kids on signing day. Well, here they are. Didn't necessarily know if they were going to play significant minutes. It was Bryce Young that we talked about a lot as maybe being the guy who was going to end up being the true freshman that was spotlighted the most. Well, that hasn't been the case. Mac Jones has locked that thing down emphatically. But now maybe you get some noise from those freshman running backs. We've seen Brian Branch, and we've seen some freshman defensive backs. Tim Smith has started to play on the defensive line. Excited to see his growth and development. But I was thinking earlier today, I said Mac Jones a second ago. I was reading Chris Hummer's feature that I told you to go check out. Second plug for it if you haven't already seen it. Mac Jones, what if Kentucky kept him? What if he stayed at Kentucky? What would Kentucky look like right now? Mac Jones certainly wouldn't have the weapons to work with there. I'm not saying he'd be the same player, but he'd be a much more viable product at quarterback in all likelihood than anything they have on their roster currently. And so that was just kind of a side note there for me earlier today. I got Bama winning this game, obviously. How they handle garbage time is the second most fascinating thing here. Do you remember back when they had Tua and he was a true freshman? And Jalen Hurts would be in, and they would get a 4-touchdown lead on someone. And then when Tagovailoa came in, it wasn't the usual bleed the clock. They were working him. They were trying to get him ready so they'd run the full offense. And there was this string of games where Alabama ran up these absurd scores that you weren't used to seeing Nick Saban do. He normally will cut it off in that 41 to 48 range if he's blowing someone out. And they were going 55 points, 58 points, 62 points. And it's because they couldn't keep Tagovailoa from scoring for obvious reasons. I expected a similar dynamic this year when Bryce Young got in games. And you haven't really seen that yet. So I wonder, now that they're coming off 2 weeks and they've essentially gone through another little mini spring, if you really wanted to, you could have done that. You're going to have some other true freshmen play here. They're going to get up on Kentucky Saturday. How they handle garbage time, and if they put Young in, how much of the offense they look to run with him, that and that alone will dictate whether they cover this number. I've got a sneaking suspicion that they're going to want to use a little bit more of that offense a little bit later in this game than they have at some other points this year. So I'm going to take Bama to win, and I actually will lay the 29. I'm going to take Bama to cover, especially if it's under 30. This one got a lot more interesting today. UCLA at Oregon. Oregon favored, when I wrote my notes earlier today, by 13. Well, they're now favored by 17. The reason why coming momentarily. This is a Saturday 3:30 Eastern Time kickoff on ESPN2. UCLA, if you watch that Sunday game, they rolled Cal on 48 hours advance notice. They handled Cal as a 3.5-point dog, by the way, pretty handedly at the Rose Bowl. And our model has kind of struggled with it. Our model almost seems to think that it's a throwaway result, and I'm not so sure I don't agree with it. So, maybe UCLA was just dynamite waiting to explode, and they did. I watched most of that game. I didn't necessarily get that sense. I just thought it was a game that looked like most other games would if you scheduled it 48 hours ahead of time. I, on the other hand, think there's going to be a lot of validation for Oregon this week. Told you how impressive it was, albeit a little bit off the radar, with the way they came from behind and the manner with which they were able to come from behind against Washington State last week. Well, now they're home, and now you got Joe Moorhead's offense significantly ahead of schedule as far as my eyeballs can see. And it's defense. It's the area, when I talked to Cristobal back in the spring and we did social distance, He was very excited about their defensive prospects. It was offense, much like everyone else when they looked at Oregon. New quarterback, new offensive line. It was offense that we may have to feel our way out a little bit there. Hey, they were ready. They needed it to fire last week, and it was ready. I think both of those sides of that ball may click this week, and it may be that inflection point to where you look at it and you say, Oregon was only favored by 13 or 17 now that Dorian Robinson Thompson, is out for UCLA, and that's not official, by the way. If you're wondering about that line move today, it's because he probably is out, quarterback for UCLA, and that's why, we got a little heads up on that. That's why I put that Oregon minus 13 out when I did on Twitter. So it's a short rest situation for UCLA, too, and it's a road game. That's all baked into the number. I just say it in case you're not aware of it. I'm going to take Oregon to win here. Love Oregon minus the points this week. Really think it's a statement week for them. Not against the opponent necessarily, but just stylistically. I think it's going to be a good week for Oregon. Last game I wanted to hit on here out on the West Coast is Southern Cal, favored by 3 at Utah. Saturday night game, actually, 10:30 Eastern Time on ESPN. Where do you think USC is? Because you got two schools of thought, two trains of thought here that you could buy into. I'm going to talk about Southern Cal a little bit later on in the mood tracker. If you've watched them, they've played Arizona State and Arizona. They've been favored by double digits against both teams. They have squeaked by both teams. So here are the two lanes here. It's two-lane road. Lane one is they're living on borrowed time, and eventually they'll be exposed. That's the lane I'm in. There's another lane where you think maybe they've just bought time, kind of like Auburn. We talked about Auburn this year. They've bought time, and they've gotten by, and they've probably won games maybe they shouldn't have won, but whatever. They won them. Well, now they click, and you look back and you say, oh, you should have gotten them when you could. I don't get the sense that the click is coming for Southern Cal, but hey, I've been wrong before. I'll probably be wrong once or twice down the road. I just don't think I am here. Talent on the line of scrimmage, what I'd be most worried about this weekend, in this game in particular for Southern Cal, because the level of it, offensive line and defensive line against Utah, rises significantly relative to what they've seen against AZ State and Arizona so far. And Arizona State ran the ball pretty well on them. Arizona threw the ball pretty well on them. I think Utah can have some success too. Now there's this element of unknown because Utah hasn't played yet, and there is a philosophy, there's a feeling around the Utah program and out west that, hey, this secondary probably a notch down from what it's been historically. You got Slovis, you got an offense that should be clicking. I've felt every time I've watched Southern Cal this year, and I've watched both games they played, it just feels like something's not happening. It feels like there's a spark that's not catching with their offense. Maybe this is the week it happens, and that secondary is the vulnerable secondary with which you can expose and you can use it as a springboard. I just don't feel that. So our model leans slightly to Utah. I lean towards them a little bit more than our model does even. I'm going to take Utah plus 3. I think Utah is going to win the game outright. And those, along with the earlier week predictions that are already in individual video form on our 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, are our Week 12 predictions.